What does presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg actually believe? And can this rising star of the Democratic Party be trusted to stick to what he says he believes? Just look at the evidence, because I'm not so sure. What is it about Mayor Pete that reminds me so much of John Kerry, who was, of course, the losing Democratic presidential candidate in 2004? Could it be that both men are keen to play up their military credentials as a way of looking tough to the media and to Republicans? John Kerry, Vietnam veteran.
I'm John Kerry, and I'm reporting for duty.
Pete Buttigieg, Afghan war vet.
I have more military experience under my belt than
anybody to come into that office since George H.W. Bush.
But you know, it's not the military background, it's the U-turns. You remember how candidate Kerry was labelled a flip-flopper, both by the media and of course by his Republican opponents. Well, Mayor Pete seems to be the flip-flopper-in-chief of the 2020 election. Name a big issue and he's almost certainly switched positions, contradicted himself, leaving those of us who wrongly saw him as a strong candidate, very impressive guy, substantive guy, feeling disappointed and feeling foolish. Take Medicare for all. Buttigieg was a big supporter, or so he said. I, Pete Buttigieg, politician, do henceforth and forthwith declare, most affirmatively and indubitably, unto the ages, that I do favour Medicare for all, he tweeted back at the start of 2018. In February 2019, he went on Morning Joe and described Medicare for all as the compromise position.
What is Medicare for all? It's a compromise. I mean, in the UK, you got national health care. We've got to stop allowing the right to move the goalposts.
But it wasn't the right that moved the goalposts on Medicare for all. It was Buttigieg. As it dawned on him that he'd need this guy's voters to have any chance of winning the nomination, and as he got more and more money from Wall Street.
Buttigieg has collected more than $3 million in so-called Wall Street money.
He changed his tune and began attacking both Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren from the right over their support for Medicare for all.
Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren believe that we have to force ourselves into Medicare for all, where private insurance is abolished.
Many would argue that it's the big donors, the special interests, who have control of the Buttigieg messaging. These days, Mayor Pete is adamant that taking money from rich people, even in wine caves, has no impact on his policies or positions.
Would that pollute my campaign because it came from a wealthy person? No, I would be glad to have that support.
But again, the flip-flop. Here he is in 2010 while running for Indiana State Treasurer.
I think we need to get special interest money out of the treasury space. And I made a decision that I wasn't going to accept any money from a bank that could be doing business with the state treasurer's office. I think it creates a conflict of interest.
Then there's the border. Mayor Pete is on tape raising his hand live on TV at a presidential debate back in June, agreeing, admirably in my view, that the act of crossing the border by a migrant should be decriminalized.
That criminalization, that is the basis for family separation.
Bold move, Pete, bold move. And yet the very next month, yep, you guessed it, he flip-flopped.
When I'm president, illegally crossing the border will still be illegal.
As a point of clarification, you did raise your hand in the last debate. You do want to decriminalize crossing the border illegally.
So in my view, if fraud is involved, then that's suitable for the criminal statute.
By October, Buttigieg was dismissing the policy of decriminalizing border crossings as some sort of horrible left-wing purity test.
There are some here on this stage who say it doesn't count unless we go even further. Immigration reform isn't enough unless we also decriminalize border crossings.
Seriously? Then there's the issue that first made me such an admirer of Mayor Pete. His willingness to advocate for proper structural reform of a very broken US political system. Here he is on my podcast, Deconstructed, back in May. Abolish the Electoral College, yes or no?
Yes, been saying that since day one.
Add new justices to the Supreme Court to balance it out, given the stolen seat.
So we definitely need to do structural reform on the Supreme Court.
But in October, in a New York Times piece all about Buttigieg moving to the center, reporter Reed Epstein revealed how, quote, multiple financial bundlers told the campaign that the Supreme Court and Electoral College proposals were not popular. Mr. Buttigieg has since quietly dropped them from his stump speech. Quietly dropped them. Wow. But perhaps his biggest flip-flop of all, Bernie Sanders.
I was a big fan of Bernie Sanders when I was 18 years old.
See, back when he was a teenager, Pete won a John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage essay contest for a piece entitled Bernie Sanders. Bernie's energy, candor, conviction, and ability to bring people together, wrote Pete, stand against a current of opportunism, moral compromise, and partisanship, which runs rampant on the American political scene. That was then. Today, though, Buttigieg is not just running against Bernie for the Democratic presidential nomination, he's putting out ridiculous press releases suggesting Sanders could alienate independents. All right, fine. It's not fair to accuse him of flip-flopping on Bernie, given it was nearly 20 years ago and he was just an 18-year-old high school student at the time. But healthcare, immigration, special interests, political reform, he's flip-flopped for the worse on all of them in the past 12 months alone. Don't get me wrong, Buttigieg would be a far better and a far more progressive presidential candidate than John Kerry ever was. In fact, even now, post flip-flops, his policy platform is to the left of Barack Obama's in 2008. But if you're looking for consistency, whether moral or political, if you're looking for a candidate who has very clear principles and sticks to them, no matter what a focus group or a big donor says to him, then maybe, just maybe, Mayor Pete isn't your guy.